Well, welcome to the live stream today. And I guess most of you didn't know we've changed our channel content somewhat, moving into a different realm. We've created about 100 videos on hidden history and crazy things about the past. And most people now, as we're moving into different content about your life today, so many people stay focused on the past and history and watching things strictly for entertainment that they're not catching on to the fact that what has happened in the past is affecting your life now. And most of all, what's not being picked up on is all of this hidden stuff from the past. Rewriting history is what these people who have been controlling your lives, who affect your monetary income, and all of these things that keep you suppressed, your 9 to 5 job person, all of these things that's being uncovered in this Dodge report now, showing that most of America's money has been funneled away from the American citizens who earn it, and is being funneled to line the pockets of this elite class that has been robbing from us. And it's time to take a look at how all of this ties in together and how it affects you, because this is the number one thing. You don't realize that it affects your time for you to live and enjoy life. It affects everything involving your income. It affects what you think about, how you spend your time. And most people have seen different movies where this stuff portrays it. It's laid out in movies for you as part of the higher magic, that they put all of this in your face. And if you don't react to it when they put it into real life effect, then, well, you've agreed to it and you've accepted whatever pain point that happens to you. So let's move through this so some of you who watch this channel can understand what's really going on. So, a lot of people understand basic things from the Bible, and that is about, Jesus and, why he came. People know that he died for the sins of the world, and he died to make change and give people a chance to reunite themselves with God. And he lived a life exemplary so you could understand how to live. And then his disciples recorded all of this in letters and in short books that were included in the Bible so that you would understand how to live. But here's where things get a little strange for everyone. What we're facing now is the church has been hijacked, just like back in the old days, the Martin Luther days, when he nailed his thesis to the door for reform from the Catholic Church. He understood that the Catholic Church had hijacked Christianity. So Rome had decided, hey, we can't stop the religion. And some say they had some influence from the people that opposed Jesus in the other country that Rome warred against, that I can't mention here because every time I do, the channel gets suppressed. So you can figure out who's running that show and suppressing what you get to see in social media. So they say that the Catholic Church hijacked Christianity and started to make into something else. Well, that's true. Now we have the modern church. It went on from that time, 1,000 years or more. And then now in about, I'd say the 1950s, 1940s, 1950s, the church began to get heavily hijacked once again, this time equally as bad, if not worse, for fooling everyone. See, America is in the problem that it's in now, and it's facing the same problems that people faced in Europe with suppression, financial loss, unexplained wars that solved nothing for them and made bankers money. The understanding of this past history, and this past history is a cover up. This cover up involves Jesus and the Bible. Now, some people say, oh, I don't believe in that. This is blasphemy to say that something was covered up from the past. Surely we know the history, know everything going on. But the truth is, as you begin to investigate this, something happened in this ancient time period. Something happened that was covered up. And where do we get this proof that we're leading to? And this proof that we're leading to is that the Bible was written to the people alive at that time. The letters were written to churches that existed at that time, not a church 2,000 years in the future, as these false preachers have been teaching. But the Bible was written to the people alive at that time, to the churches that existed at that time. So when Paul was writing letters and John was writing letters, he was writing them to the churches and to fellow Christians that were alive at that time. And everything that they were writing about was relevant to what may occur in their own lifetimes. Now, that included one of the most amazing and hard to believe for modern Christians events, and that is that Jesus said to the people standing there, he said, surely some of you standing here will not taste death. That means you're not going to die before you see me return. Now, the millennial kingdom is what we're talking about, the millennial kingdom of Christ. Now, Jesus didn't say you would see some kind of metaphysical return of me, because everyone knew his return was about, what he was talking about is the millennial reign and all of the events that John wrote about with Antichrist and wars and rumors of wars and the sacking of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple that Jesus talked about. All of these things were relevant to the people alive at that time. Okay, so this is the number one thing that Christians have been fooled into understanding. They cannot grasp, or they're not getting, and I was the same way. Let me tell you something. I had written about it in a book. This is how much I supported the mainstream idea before I became awakened to the fact that we all have been heavily deceived. And we all want to please God, and they have used this tactic in what's called Satan's Satan's short season. So we got a big problem going on now, because Jesus said he was going to return. That's true, right? So what has happened is the modern church has hijacked all of this entire event that has already taken place. They are telling you that the history of the world is a certain way, and this history covers up that entire event that took place. Okay, so I want to keep you on the timeline so you understand what we're talking about. So when John was writing the book of Revelation, he said, return, Jesus, quickly, return, right? This is like at the last part of the Bible. And so, and Jesus said, some of you aren't going to die, as I said, and you'll see me return. Okay, so now we've got an event. So we're either looking at narcissistically viewing the Bible and thinking that, hey, the minute I open this Bible, that's when the Bible begins, and it's about me, and Jesus is coming to save me from all this bad stuff's going on. I'm going to be taken up in the special Jesus ship in this rapture, and I'm not going to have to face any troubles from this end time stuff. Well, that's a new creation. Nobody believed that until the past, 70 or 80 years or so. So this is a new concept interjected in by this Scofield Bible. The Scofield Bible was created by the Rothschilds to get the church to support the creation of this nation that now Christians have been taught to worship above their own nations, and I believe is a false nation based off of Jesus' teachings about something called the vineyard. He gives a prophecy, and he tells about the vineyard, and how these people in this story rented a vineyard, a wine vineyard. And and then the master goes away, and these people who are not the owners or the heirs of the land, they occupy the land. And then when it's time to collect the grapes or the growth of the crops, the master sends some servants over to get it. And it's all talking about spiritual stuff here. It's talking about Jesus. And the people occupying the land say, hey, you know what? Let's keep all this for ourselves. We don't want these prophets coming, basically. So we'll kill them. All right. So they kill them and beat them and stuff, and are keeping the crops and the fruit of the land for themselves. So the master basically sends after that, sends some more servants, and they kill them. So finally he says, you know what? I'm going to send my son. Surely they will respect him. And so the idea that what Jesus is saying is that I'm going to send, he's telling that he's coming. And this is a story about him, and the occupants of this land where he was at are going to reject him. And he tells the story that the master, which is God, sends the son, and the occupants of this land, talking about who Jesus faced at that time, the occupants of that land decided amongst themselves, hey, if we kill him, we will take the inheritance for ourselves, and then take over everything, rule and run it ourselves. So this is the story Jesus is telling about himself, and what these occupants are going to do to him, and what their goal is ultimately in the end. So what was that goal, and what have we seen happen? This is where you need to escape this Scofield Bible modern church, is that the understanding of the future of what the intent of these people are, is to take over and rule the world for themselves, because they feel they have killed the master's son and taken the inheritance of the earth, because Jesus created the earth. So they took the inheritance for themselves. So what is their intent? It's not that hard to figure out. It is to take over the world. All right. So if we move from that subject, and we have that clear, that those who killed Jesus, as Jesus said himself in the story, their intent is not to be on God's side, but to take over the world for themselves. So we have this thing called Satan's short season, where Satan is sent into the world. Again, he is released from his chains to deceive the world. But what happened before Satan deceived the world? Jesus returned. This is the millennial kingdom of Christ that so many people think is going to happen in the future. Well, this is part of the great deception. Satan has come into the world. The history of what occurred has already happened. And we are in the time of Satan's short season, the great deception. And he has now ended up covering up that entire historical event. How can I prove this? So let's look at two factors. Two factors are the mud flood. If you haven't heard of this, you can look it up and start doing some research. The entire earth, all these buildings that you see around all the great cities, from country to country to country, these old buildings in your downtowns where you see basement windows sticking up, and you think, oh, well, it was just constructed at that time. And not only the basement windows, but there's plaques on the side of the building that will say, oh, well, this building was built in 1845. And they'll have a short story written about it on the internet. And when you read this story, it's the same story about all these buildings that were supposedly built in the 1800s and early 1900s. They always pick some random guy. They did some kind of lottery, and then some guy wins the contest, never heard of him before, and then he builds this magnificent 500-room castle. And this castle is so magnificent. When you go into it, they even have rooms cordoned off you can't even go into, marble. And you find out when you research, it was supposedly built in a year, maybe 2 years. And the guy who built it is some unknown guy. Most of them have names that kind of match state to state, same types of names, Jacob this or John that. But you find that the population of these towns where they said these buildings were built, maybe they had 2,500 people living in the entire huge area. And, you know, if you think about this, 2,500 people, why would you build a 700-room post office, right? So you wouldn't. So look into these constructions of these buildings and research mud flood, because mud flood is the cornerstone to knowing that history, you've been lied to about the history of your own country and your own towns. A cataclysmic event took place, I don't know, maybe 100 years ago, and they covered it up. 100 years ago, mud flood took place around the world. It's undeniable. You can't get around this history that took place. Yet, you cannot find a single history book. You can't find anything that's talking about this cataclysm. Why is this so significant? Because if something buried these buildings in 20, 40 feet of mud or more, where you have a building they said was built in 1800s, and there's 2 stories below it with a door in the old street, that means that the crops would have been buried. That means that millions of people would have died around the world. And if nobody is mentioning this or telling anyone about it, it means that history in itself cannot be trusted, right? Someone is covering up a cataclysmic event so extreme that they would have had to just, from that time on, rewrite history. So our past 100 years of history before that could have been completely rewritten. We don't know what really went on before that time period. So it looks like when the Rockefellers took over the education system, they removed all the history book, replaced all the people teaching this information, redid the science, and began teaching everyone information that wasn't true. And this includes the movement into the church, covering up of the history, and the Bible trying to match it up with this fake history. And the second part I was talking about is the castles. Everyone knows about the megalithic structures that we can't explain, these giant stones all over the world where they can weigh several tons. We don't have any equipment on Earth that can even move them. We know about those. But when it comes to castles and what they call the Dark Ages, so supposedly the castle time was when all this primitive stuff was going on. They called it the Dark Ages because people were so ignorant, as they portray in the movies and the books and stuff. Yet, when we look at the Dark Ages, we see these magnificent creations of armor. I don't know about you, but I can't create armor right now. I could not go and get the metals and mix them and create these fine swords and create this armor that they wore at the time that perfectly fits your body that you could fight in. That's science of some sort. And even stronger than that, some people say that they were more than just protecting from swords and stuff. They may have been electronic or may have been able to conduct some type of energy. I don't know. That's pretty stretching it. But when we look at these cathedrals and castles from the Middle Ages, what they call the Dark Ages, they are, without a doubt, magnificent, unexplainable. We don't have contractors today that can build these things. They are all wonders of the world. What the big thing is, when we look at these castles, they're built on top of mountains sometimes. They're in places that are extremely difficult to get to. We don't have dump trucks now that can move some of those stones up the side of buildings, or cranes to lift some of these. Some of them are built with hundreds of thousands of carved stones or bricks. How did they harvest them? How did they chip them out? With chisels? Well, at that time, supposedly they had bronze chisels. Bronze chisels will not chisel away granite. How did they cut these stones to these castles? How did they get things like the marble, the columns? Where did all of this material come from? How did they use their primitive wooden ships to get stone or marble from Italy, have a football field of marble shipped in one of these old wooden ships that they had, and then get it across the country and up a mountainside in Germany? Right? Okay, people don't mention this kind of stuff for critical thinkers. I was in construction for most of my life, and I understand what it takes to build things. And all of us in this realm, when we start looking at castles and cathedrals and 700-room post offices that look like wonders of the world, whoever built these, and the theory is that angels built these, and that superhumans had to have built these things. They're almost as if when Jesus said, "In my Father's house there are many mansions, and I come to prepare a place for you." Some have even said that these castles weren't built by men, but they were built by angels. And they were brought down because there is no explanation how on top of a cliff, on top of some huge unobtainable area, a magnificent castle could be built that is a wonder, that is a tourist site now for people to come look at in awe. How could primitive people in the Middle Ages have built these structures with the timeline and the historical information they gave us about their tools? So ox carts and chisels did not build these magnificent cathedrals or castles of the past. Okay, so the castles and the mud flood are the two factors we must look at as evidence. We have physical evidence and common sense to know, hey, you know what? Our history books in college, our history books in high school are a lie. They're telling us a lie, and they're covering up the past. So what are they covering up? Why would they cover up the fact that people built castles in however way they did? What they would cover up is Jesus reigning during this time called the Millennial Kingdom. If that's how the castles got here, if that's the event that took place, then that makes a lot of sense as to why they would cover up history. Because if it's Satan's short season now, and we're in the age of deception, then they absolutely would rewrite history, and they absolutely would cover up all of this information. And if it's Satan's short season now, then the media would be controlled by this dark entity and his minions. Information and history books and the things we get taught would be controlled by his minions. And it would keep us in the dark, and especially the church being flip-flopped. So here's the big revelation I'd like you to take from this. In Satan's short season, it seems like everything, especially in America, it's like they talk about freedom. They say you're free. It's the land of the free, but we have the most laws of any country in the world, almost double. We have the most lawyers. Why do we have all of this? if we're so free? We have more police violence than any other country. What's going on to control this narrative? Because I would like to live free. I know you'd like to live free. You'd like to be financially free. You would like to be able to vacation. You'd like to have more time with your kids. And what are they discovering with all of these Doge reports now, where they're finding just how much corruption, how much, think about this. They have stolen your work. Everything that the American people have worked for, we find we keep getting told, oh, you're in debt, trillions of dollars in debt, in debt, in debt, in debt. You have to work for this or that. They've been stealing our money now as these reports are coming out. All right. So, Satan comes to rob, steal, and destroy. We know that. Rob, steal, and destroy. So what have we been seeing going on is these reports are coming out now that we have been robbed. Our banks have, all of our government agencies, we thought they were going to send money and do good things around the world. And what we're finding out is it's just going back to line the pockets of the minions of the Dark One. They have been deceiving us by what they've been doing. So we thought things were going for good, that our struggles, our taxes, what we're working for, our sacrifices, and what we're finding out is all of that money, all the things that are controlling our lifestyle is going to line the pockets of someone else. This is part of Satan's short season, the time of deception. Now, here's the cornerstone. We have to ask ourselves, who is working for the Dark Lord? Who is stealing the money? Is it just random people, or is it a collective group? Is it someone that opposes Christ? Now, here's what you have to realize. Our history was stolen. There's proof that Jesus returned, or at least good evidence by the unexplained past. This unexplained past through mud flood and the millennial kingdom and Jesus' own word in the book of Revelation, and it telling us that there's going to be a short season of deception, a time of deception. So if we're living in a time of deception, and we know that the devil hates us, and only people who are thriving truly are those who serve him, and we're seeing that these reports from the Doge looking into things, that all the money and our hard work has been stolen for us to line his minions' pockets, then we have been put in a type of slavery from this. Now, this slavery keeps us free from living like the millennial kingdom. And so all of this deception, what I'm leading to is I'm trying to get people to understand, the people watching this, that the news is controlled by a group of people. These agencies who have been pocketing all the money from the hard work of the millions of Christians and other people in America who are having to pay into these taxes, pay into the IRS. The money is being stolen. So instead of it going back into a country to give you more freedom, more time to spend with your family, they're keeping you imprisoned by hiding the past, which hides what's going on now, which causes the church to be able to be controlled through money, because the mainstream church is teaching all of this stuff. If you look into this, you're going to find they have been paid off. Who paid them off? Who created the Scofield Bible and paid these pastors who have come on television? It's mostly the mainstream evangelists. We find that they have been paid off, just like U.S. senators, just like judges, just like all of these people. They have received. You wonder how they got mega churches and book deals and traveling, and they're always heading off to Ben Shapiro's favorite Middle Eastern country, and what's happening and who they're having contacts with. They got paid off to deceive the American people to believe, and the American church to believe that the millennial kingdom did not already happen and that it's going to come. So all of this bad stuff that's happening in the world, the wars and rumors of wars now, is just what God has planned. And they fooled the Christians into believing that if they stand up and try to stop it, they're going to get in the way of God's plan. Instead of doing what the Bible says for Christians to do and building a country and building a strong faith and in a moralistic society, they got Christians to stand down because they're all waiting in these Left Behind series movies. Remember all of this stuff that came out? They got Christians through this psychological means to stand down for a time of all the evil that's taking place in the world. This was part of Satan's great deception of the church. They also got the church to support the minions, since Jesus' time, the minions behind opposing Christ. Now, if I was Satan, would I come right out and say, would you come right out and say that you're opposing Christians, or would you appear to be on your side? In fact, would you try to get Christians to support and worship your effort instead of, it's like Sun Tzu's Art of War, right? Christians now are supporting the very minions who have been stealing all their money and rewriting their history books and paying off pastors to teach them that Jesus is still returning for the millennial kingdom. That's the great deception. Okay? Jesus already returned, and they left for the place called Camp of Saints, whether that's in heaven, whether that's another place. I don't know where that is. Nobody truly knows. What we do know is deception is taking place. And as this all starts to reveal now, this through all of these, when Trump got into office, and I'm not saying I support or not support him, but when he got into office and they started investigating where all America's money went and what's happening through all these programs, they've found now $35 trillion of money going places or overcharging. Do you know how much $35 trillion? That's most of the countries in the world combined aren't worth that much money. This is how much money has been extracted, and money is power. What I'm saying now, and I want you to hear this clearly because it's research every Christian and every conservative American needs to do. The news keeps you distracted, and maybe they're telling you about all of this stuff taking place, right? They're telling you that the money went somewhere and they're bad people, and these bad people, they'll portray them as individuals, like it's just one person who was behind doing it and maybe they scammed some money. What I'm telling you, it's a collective. It's a group of people with an organized agenda. And what your job is to do is to figure out who, as a collective group, ran this whole entire scheme, because you're talking about a nationwide scheme to fool the people and make this happen. So your job is to look and see, is there a connection between pharma and Medicaid and Medicare, and who received the kickbacks and $30 trillion or $30 billion in fraud in a year, $50 trillion in fraud? There is a mafia, there is a collective group organized who is extracting all this money, who runs these corporations, who organizes and plans this, who controls congressmen and senators. Now, this is so powerful to keep it to keep it hidden from you. Think about it. It's like a cloak that's been put over your eyes from seeing. Who owns the media? And the media is where the information comes from for you to know. Who owns and controlled the educational boards and the school curriculums? Who controlled these LGB, LMNO, ABC movements? Who was behind all of that and funded it and organized it? Who was flying all of the immigrants from the borders and driving them in buses and flying them in planes into towns? I'm telling you, it's a collective, organized group. And what I say, who directly opposes Jesus while simultaneously the church says is your best friends and that you should support. The church tells you you should support the very people who oppose Christ and still oppose Christ for 2,000 years. I know that's a tough subject for most Christians because it was for me. I told you I wrote in a book about how I supported all of this. I was brainwashed since I was a child. But when I actually read the New Testament for myself and I read what Jesus said, and I started to look in who runs all these organizations, who's been deceiving the American people, who has been causing us, you and I, the common people, to live lesser lives. We're restricted by millions of laws. The IRS takes 40, 50% of your income to keep you from growing and adventuring and seeing and getting involved in politics and making sure your government, everything's run correctly. You're suppressed like a prison, and it's being done by Satan's minions, the devil's minions, of course. It's the only way as a collective because individual small groups of people could never organize and take over a country so well. You think I'm kidding? Look into how many other countries, once you find out who it is, this has been done to. How many times it has been repeated throughout history for a couple thousand years. And you'll begin to see who would have covered up the millennial kingdom, hidden the past, created this narrative that Jesus is going to return. Because if you think he's going to be returning, you're not going to do anything about the problems happening now. You're going to stand down and just wait for Jesus to come save you. Instead of opposing with authority the very minions and the evil that is harming your country right now. So I don't want to go on forever. I just did this quick live stream here for people to start to think about what's going on, who the collective group is who's running this plot to extract all the money, make our lives more difficult, and is harming every American citizen. And it looks like they're trying to do it and collect the money to rule the world. And it kind of sounds like when I said earlier about Jesus's parable about the vineyard and how the tenants don't own the land. So when Jesus talked about the people living in this land, he said they're tenants. It's God's land. It's his land, right? And they decided, hey, we're going to kill the heir so that we can take the land, and that is the earth, and rule it for ourselves. So if it's Satan's short season, he has minions working for him. Who are the minions? And what are they doing? And what is their ultimate plot? This is what I would say for you to do to realize what's truly going on in the earth now. If you would like to start to make more money in your business, if you're an entrepreneur, if you want to do side hustles, any of this type of stuff, because they've made our life so hard to make money and hidden the secrets. Everybody's trying to search constantly for courses and different things on how to make money. We have taken the best, and after 30 years of research on my own in business, we've taken the best information that's out there for you to gain, make wealth, start a business on your own, plug that into an AI prompt where you answer a few questions about your business, how much money you want to make, maybe you want to start a new business, and it will give you a full blueprint of what you should do to make money, to start a new business, and to help your family and your life to get out of the situation you're in and stop the 9 to 5 hell that you might be facing. You can check that out in the link in the description. I'll put in there for you or in the chat. We'll talk to you soon. I'm Dan Collier for Soul News and Kingdom Gear. See you later. Thanks for joining us.